Welcome to Wabi Sabi podcast. I am your host, Adam Yasmin. So much going on, too much news, too much information and misinformation, too many options, too much time on devices, or maybe just not enough time feeling your feelings. Not quite sure. But regardless, I hope you and your family, loved ones, friends, comrades are staying safe and healthy during this pandemic and doing what you can to survive this election cycle, which I think we all know will not end on November 3rd. All that said, please do what you can do to maintain a healthy boundary and time management with your device usage. If you need any help or support, tips, strategies, ideas, brainstorming, if you just want to vent to someone, please reach out. I have been pursuing a course, a certificate on digital wellness coaching, which really explores the ability for us to have a balanced and healthy relationship with our daily technology usage. So please reach out to me through my website at adamyasmin.com or through Instagram or through the podcast website as well. All that said, I'm really excited to bring back this returning guest, Joseph Cohen, CEO and founder of Universe, which is a tool that helps people build, publish, maintain, upgrade a website all on your iPhone or iPad. It's an incredible tool I've been using for the last 3 years, and this is the second conversation I've had with Joseph. So without further ado, please enjoy Joseph Cohen. Joe, welcome back to Wabi Sabi podcast.
Great to be here.
So much has happened, not just for you and the team at Universe, but as we know, here in the world.
Oh, something's changed.
Something may have happened in the last 7-8 months. It has become almost comical to try and not talk about what's going on, because it is so all-encompassing. But it's not about denying the things that have transpired up until this point, but it's more about really, I think for me, reflecting on how things have fermented in this time. And so when we first spoke about a year and a half ago or so, Universe had already been around for almost 2 years. I'd say about 2 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
And now you've passed the 3rd-year mark. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been at it for a bit over 3 years, and we're a team of 25 people now.
So you're a team of 25. You're a distributed team of 25. Is that right?
Distributed. We've got folks all over the U.S., and we actually hired our first international person in Mexico a couple months ago. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. So from the perspective of the pandemic, things at Universe probably haven't slowed down, I imagine, because you already were a distributed team to begin with. I imagine things have ramped up during this time.
Yeah, I mean, a few things came into play. One was that we had been distributed from the get-go, so we didn't miss a beat when the pandemic hit in terms of work. Second is that we raised a round of capital right as the pandemic was sort of getting underway. So that was in March, April. That was a $10 million round from Google Ventures. So that gave us ammunition. And then the third was that because people were at home on the internet, and the economy wasn't doing too hot. People were starting new businesses, new ideas. Our set of tools was just ideal for the moment. So it's sort of this crescendo of these three things where this moment for us has been very fruitful from a creative perspective, um, but obviously a tough time for everybody. So we're trying to do our part, but yeah, it's been interesting for me, as the world I think has been in this moment. Hang on one second, it's a bit loud. I'm in New York, so
It's Wabi Sabi, man. That's what it is.
kids, I have traffic.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's been sort of the story for us so far. So we've grown the team from 10 people to 25. We built a set of tools that allows someone to start a business on their site with just their phone. So we have a full set of commerce tools, and we have a very aggressive sort of product roadmap for the next few months, and yeah, it's been an exciting period for us, nonetheless.
It's amazing. I remember just because, as a member of the universe family and, just being involved on the socials and stuff, I remember, sometime in April or so catching wind of, this, this huge round of funding. And I know I congratulated you, or at least the team then. And, it's definitely, that's a big bit of news. So the congratulations still stand. um, you know, I've been since we spoke, in 2019, which is like 1,000 years ago now. Um, I was getting into very much into aspects of digital well-being and digital wellness coming from the freelance rat race UX
Right.
field, um, because it was, everything in tech started to fall prey to the gig economy. And there's something to be said about a tool like Universe, even now in a pandemic, where it is, again, from the user perspective, it's so empowering. I've now completely reinvented my site. That's probably the fourth generation of my site right now, and it's completely. I'm transitioning it into like, hey, we're in a pandemic. Hey, we're stuck at home. Hey, I'm not focused on, consulting as a freelance UXer because I think I think the ship has sailed already. Just in terms of like, just to be really transparent, and this isn't a criticism for distributed teams whatsoever, but just to give a little voice for a second for maybe people in similar positions, designers and engineers and such. Things just before the pandemic were already like, it was already kind of a cutthroat survival of the fittest. um, if if you outbid, or if you lower your bid to a client's project, then you will get the carrot, so to speak. And so a culture of that is like, how is that going to last? you know and then the pandemic hits, and then offices close, everybody goes fully remote, which is an achievement in such a short amount of time, no doubt. But also the fact that companies and startups can hire remote means there's really no incentive to hire locally. Again, understandable, to reduce overhead and such. So when I realized now I'm competing, not just competing for the same gigs with fellow designers, let's say here in LA or here in California, now it's like, really amazing people in Estonia and Ukraine and Manila and Hong Kong wherever. And so that's when I realized, as I've been kind of fermenting myself in this pandemic, like, I'm really focused on really on conversation, which is really why I started the show a year and a half ago anyway. So vamping on that, I've really been into getting into digital wellness, really as a coaching module. So That being said, again, because we are hyper connected and we are sort of, we have our addictive tendencies to things like social media for marketing or for communication purposes. Again, this tool, aka universe, is is constantly being refined and updated. It's gotten so much stronger just since we spoke last, in the last year and a half. And yet it's still such an amazing tool to utilize on its own timeline. There's a unique uh I don't know how to I feel like I'm ranting right now, so forgive me, but I'm just wanted to give praise for this tool and the continued refined experience of it, because um, there's no possibility of becoming addicted to something like this, even though it is an app, and you can spend an infinite amount of hours on it if that's what you choose to do, but that's not even the way that it is going to be utilized best. And I think um, just from that perspective, from a digital wellness perspective, in which we collectively are looking at our tech addiction and our our digital tools, and looking at them with not a harsh eye, but just with some empathy to question, what are we using, how are we using it, is it benefiting our lives in the day to day, are we still able to have meaningful offline experiences even though everything is online now. So again, thank you for making this, continuing to refine this tool. It's been
Well,
really
thank you.
amazing.
I appreciate that. What I'd say there is we universe is a tool. It's a tool, and we are tool makers.
Hmm.
And when you make a tool, your job is to empower other people, to literally give power. Um, and the problem with most things on the internet is that they're not tools. They are sort of consumption experiences, if you will. And their job is not to empower, but in many ways to
Yeah.
exploit you, to take your time, to take your money, to take your attention, your data. But that's all a question of business models and intention and values. Um, but I've been adamant from day one here. Like we're creating a tool, and our job is to um, build something that is useful for our creators and empowers them to grow and to build and to express and um, and so our interests are aligned, like when you grow, we grow. And that's a very healthy and virtuous cycle. And I think a lot of the problem on the internet is that the models actually are more antagonistic, where the creators of the platforms are at odds with the interests of the people who use them. And I think it starts with the business model, frankly. So yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words, but the way we approach building things at Universe, and I think it comes through in the product, and I think that the product almost encourages it, is that we have this idea of kaizen, which means in Japanese continuous improvement. So we're never done. We're always improving. So we have an incredible product. It does a lot of things really well, but there's so much more that we want it to do, and there's such a vision for where it's going to go. And a fruitful project is one that is constantly opening and unfolding and sort of showing you new places to go. That is very much true with Universe. There's no, even though we're several years into this, we have a wild imagination of where we're going to take it. And what we encourage our creators to do, we don't really do this explicitly. It's more sort of the message of the product, is we encourage you to think about your own work, your own site, your own products, your own life in the same way. Instead of going underground for 2 years and trying to build the perfect thing, it's like, no, just put something out there, put a gesture out into the world, see how it works, see how the world interacts with it. And then you put out a second gesture. It's this sort of dance where you put out a foot and then you listen and then you put out another foot. And I think that dance is really important. And I think that I think your example of your site evolving several times is exactly what we want to hear. I mean, the whole modality of people like spending months building a website, putting it out into the world, we think that's an obsolete concept. Like, put something out there that's the minimum sort of viable execution of your idea, and then learn and listen and watch, and then you make your second move.
Exactly. I also just wanted to point out, I really appreciate that you refer to us as creators and not as users. Again, that's a baseline. It's like a baseline business model nod right there, because again, having been into digital minimalism and digital well-being recently, and having watched The Social Dilemma for me, my own kind of confirmation bias, um, reminding me why I deleted, certain social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter already, a year or two ago. I think it's super important from a foundational level that you, as the founder and the CEO of Universe, that you have reverence for everyone involved as creators, people who are participating at whatever stage that they're participating at.
Yeah, I wrote a blog post before I actually started the company. It was called Principles for Better Software. And I mean, the ones I outlined were like empowering, educational, free as in speech, mindful, sort of alive, convenient, trusting, and fun. And I think those are that I wrote that I think in 2014. But most of the software that we use today does not adhere to those principles, and it could. Like one of the things that people think don't really appreciate is that software, like everything else in our modern life, is built by other humans. People have made the decisions that result in the thing that you use.
Yep.
Not some arbitrary fact of the universe. Someone has decided to make that thing look this way, to behave in this particular manner. And those decisions matter. And I think that we're, as a culture, becoming more aware of those decisions. But I think, I would encourage people who have different ideas about how things should work to get involved and change it. And that doesn't mean just as designers, but as critics and thinkers and writers. We live, I think one thing that the internet, the pandemic has shown is that we sort of live two lives today. We live a life in the physical world, and we live a life on the internet. And that's just a fact of life. And so the question is, how do you make that dynamic healthy and nourishing, as opposed to sort of soul crushing, commercial, industrial? That's the work to be done.
There's two things I want to comment on that, because it's beautifully said. The first thing is there is an almost comedic timing to, I've noticed some recent articles that have been, tossed around in the sort of mainstream media washing machine of like, there's a 50, scientists and researchers state that there's a 50% chance we're living in a simulation. Or there was another article that came out by, I think, a NASA researcher down in Antarctica, proposing we may be like dealing with a parallel universe that may be going backwards in time while we're going forwards in time. These kinds of science fiction sounding things, which really, if you actually place them into just behind, in a transparency sheet, just behind what you just said, that here we are living these two lives today. We live a life in this physical realm, and then we live this other life in this ethereal, information and internet driven realm.
I mean, think about it. I'm staring at a piece of glass and speaking to it. Mm-hmm. Like if an alien came down and did not see what I was doing, but just they would think I was absolutely crazy. I'm literally I'm speaking to a wall, but it makes sense, right? Like, because we're now jacked into cyberspace and we're interacting at a whole other level. I mean, look, there's a lot of negativity there, but there's also it's pretty cool. I mean, like our minds are evolving right now. We're doing a lot more. Like there's a lot more happening, and for better and worse. Like there's definitely negatives to that, but like I am in general like a techno utopian. I believe that the future is going to be better, and I think it's going to be better through technology. That doesn't mean that technology is inherently good, but it means that it's possible to create good technology. And so I think what I would sort of amend the current commentary around is like, it's not whether the internet is good or bad. It's not whether technology is good or bad. It's here and it's our life and it's only going to become more entrenched. But we need to make good stuff. We
Yes.
need to make stuff that inspires and that brings joy and that brings out the best in us, um, and not stuff that brings out the worst because that's just a slippery slope.
Yeah. That's the second thing you reminded me of in these statements, which I fully agree with, is that um, this philosopher historian Yuval Noah Harari, may have heard of him. Um, one of the things he's echoed, in the pandemic is, technology is not determinant. It's not, AI is not out to kill us. Those kinds of myth laden, fear based, belief systems, sort of archaic, fossilized beliefs. Um, and yeah, it is really up to us every single day, how we're utilizing these tools and what difference we can make, not just only in our lives, but also, hopefully for other people as well.
There's this quote I really like, which is, "We shape our tools, and thereafter they shape us."
Mm,
We shape our tools, right? Like, and it's very easy to forget that, but it's really important not to, because. And by the way, tools are not just a hammer and a nail, although
mm,
those are included. It's also the language that we use,
yes.
the architecture of space. These things around us create our thinking and they influence our thinking. So
Mm,
it's really important that we curate what we surround ourselves with extremely intentionally. And that if we don't like the available options, we build something new.
exactly. In this in this pandemic, how have you viewed your creator base differently? Sort of, let's say, if you kind of do a retrospective in the last 7, 8 months.
I think that on the whole, it's accelerated a lot of the trends that we've been seeing,
Mm,
which is sort of creative and entrepreneurial renaissance of individuals who have a unique vision and a unique idea they want to bring into the world. We've seen a flourishing of that, and we expect that to continue. And we want to be the platform for really enabling that, at a large scale. But I think in a bigger way, I heard this great quote. It's from the uh, Jewish mystic philosopher Gershom Scholem, and he said, "There are in history what you would call plastic hours, namely crucial moments when it is possible to act. If you move then, something happens." And I think this is really relevant to now. I think we are living in a plastic hour.
mm,
I think we're living in a moment where the world has sort of melted a little bit, and the institutions around us um, are melting. And I think that's very unnerving because these are the foundations of modern life. But the truth is that in many cases, they're obsolete and they need to be rethought. And I think that we have a moment right now for a new generation of builders, of creators, of entrepreneurs, of artists to remake the world. And that's going to be a difficult process because we're starting from a rough spot. But I think it's going to result in a much better world. I think it's going to result in a world that has more diversity, more ideas, um, and better values. And I think of Universe as a platform to help people do that, to help rebuild the world in that way.
Mm.
And that's what we're about. So, I mean, that means specific things when we talk about product and what we're building, but at a high level, um, I think we're in this plastic hour, and I think we're in this moment of change. And I think it's very easy in a tough time like this to be overwhelmed by the chaos, by the uncertainty of it all. And what I would encourage people is to think about, okay, this is a moment where change is possible in a way that it just hasn't been in decades. And all the rules have been thrown out. And it's very clear, like, we need new answers. We need new ideas. The status quo will not work. The leadership has failed across the board, political, educational, you name it, media. It all needs work. Technological, we need business, we need new institutions, we need new ideas, we need new people to start things. And I think of the universe as like your little toolkit to get going. You have an idea, this is your way of bringing it to the world in 2020.
Yep. Yeah, you touched on a lot of smaller questions too that I was thinking about, I was ruminating on. Yeah, just for a sort of proverbial pause. I mean, like, what are you thinking about this week? Like, what is something that you're seeking perspective on in particular?
Well, um, I'm very work is consuming right now in a really good way. It feels very much feel like I'm in a flow state, and but it is sort of a lot of what my cycles are going towards. One of the cool things is that we are now a larger team. Like I said, 25 people, and I've never managed a company at that size, so that's a new experience for me. And it's really awesome. I get to work with some amazing people. We have more bandwidth to do awesome stuff, and I just get exposure to the different ways that people's brains work and how they thrive and where they need a different context, and that's been really interesting for me to sort of watch. Um, and so there are a lot of like specific things that I'm working on that I think are really exciting, which we're not quite ready to talk about. But other than that, I've been really thinking a lot about. Um, I've been thinking a lot about this idea, like I just said, of the failure. I think of the things we've come to depend on, and that I think in the face of that, it's very easy to become frustrated and dispirited and angry. Um, and I think that, similar to how we create the tools that create the world, I also think that psychologically, we need to surround ourselves with positive narratives, because I think that if you're constantly surrounded by negative things, you're going to reinforce those visions. And that's easier said than done, especially in the climate that we're in. But I'm sort of like obsessed with surrounding myself with like nourishing narratives, um, and that means that I sometimes don't check the news, and it means that I don't check Twitter as often, and it means that I curate who I spend time with.
Mm.
Uh, so I've been thinking about that too.
That's definitely, given that we're supposed to have an election in a few weeks, it's definitely very important to think about that. And yeah, I feel like we've basically completely danced around talking about our current culture and conspiracy theories and this current framework for the proliferation of negative thought, conspiracy thought, and how that really feeds on itself. Like we're in a never-ending story sort of version of that, fantasy where it's like the nothing, or it's probably it kind of feels like the nothing, really.
My
And
theory of what's happening is that, like every year, I feel like at the end of the year, people are like, oh, wow, can you believe this year is over? Like, good riddance. What a year. I can't believe what 2021 is going to have. I feel like the past 5 years, that's been the case.
Mm.
Like every year, it's just another thing. And I just think that what's happening is we are, we as a civilization are in this massive sort of inflection moment with the internet. I think this is all just the internet. I think this is the internet doing its thing. And one way of thinking about it is like, this can be trippy for a second, but
Do it. Do it.
there's this French philosopher in early 20th century who introduced this idea called the noosphere. It's N-O-O sphere.
Mm-hmm.
The basic idea was that in the future, you would have a telecommunications network where the individuals on the planet would be able to connect to each other, and they would form a global mind. And he basically described the internet before the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when you do that? What happens when you connect people with electrical signals? Well, those people become like neurons, and the synapses are the connection between them. And so it's almost like you took a set of billions of neurons and you wired them up for the first time. And that's the reality that we've been living in for the past 20 years, but really in a mainstream way for the past 10 years. And so what's the way to think about this is like, we're like a 10-year-old brain. We're a very immature brain. Like this is a mind that's just been lit up, and it's emotional and it's erratic and it's hysterical, and it can be a bully and it can be a baby, and it just sort of wildly swings. And we need to sort of grow up. We need to like learn how to deal with it. And so I think that's sort of what's happening. I think things are going to continue to get weirder
Mm-hmm.
until we start to get a handle on this new thing, this new brain. Because if we compare it to a pre-internet world, it doesn't make any sense, because once we've crossed this chasm, it's a whole new thing,
Yes.
So that's a little bit of how I think about it. I think things are going to get weirder until we get this handle on it. And so it's like, embrace it, understand it, and like, let's figure out how we can do something about it,
There is a tool that I've recently come across, because the last conversation I had was with Audrey Tang, who's a digital minister of Taiwan. Don't know if you're familiar with her. And if you're not familiar with how Taiwan's been doing, this year,
Yep.
like absolutely must look into it, especially how Audrey and her team within the Taiwanese cabinet have bolstered their transparent democracy using everyday tools, as well as a very sort of Kaizen DIY spirit of how do we keep maintaining consensus. Forget about unity or like utopia. It's like, how do we maintain consensus? There's always going to be sort of yin and yang, black and white, right and left, so that's just kind of a seed planted there. But
I'm going to have to look them up.
It must look them up, or just listen to the last conversation. It was posted on October 1st, which is the fourth anniversary of their being elected to Taiwan's cabinet. Consensus. Maybe this is a seed to plant, something you and the team may want to consider as a way to make it a little more, make universe a little bit more conversational, maybe if between creators, or in a way that to have people sort of not necessarily chat with creators. But so this tool called Polis, pol.is, pol.is, was created by a engineer in Seattle, and Taiwan and Audrey's team have used it to find consensus between seemingly super separate groups. like right versus left, like let's say on the political spectrum. So it is a you should look, just without spending too much time, trying to articulate how it works and what it looks like. It may be interesting to somehow embed that into, the features that's offered at Universe, just to um, create conversation by way of, again, finding consensus anonymously between groups of people, um, so that we find ways to reduce divisiveness and actually come to agreement on things like basic sort of human values. Um,
Definitely.
so, um, wow. Well, I mean, I don't know how you're doing on time, but I can do this every week because there's lots of mirror in terms of, thought patterns and worldviews. And yeah, man, I just really appreciate you and the team that's behind the machine. And I look forward to, the next opportunity.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of really cool stuff in store. It's always great to see you. And I'm so glad that you've been on this ride with us. A lot more to come.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.